Welcome.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you all. And thank you, West Music, for having me and for this, just the invitation to create this course and be able to share something that I'm so just so deeply passionate about. I'm really, really grateful to be able to be here and to be sharing all of that with you all. And I know that our time is like of the essence. We've got 27 minutes, and we're going to do the most we can with that 27 minutes. I do have some slides that can sort of help guide us through things. I'm not going to be relying too heavily on those because, like it was, like Kathleen said, we want this to feel like an opportunity for you to really get a chance to know me, to know the topic, and gauge for yourself, okay, do I want to dive deeper into this course and into this subject? And so we want to make sure that we're leaving space for you to ask questions in the chat or to raise your hands on Zoom. And as much as possible, there's folks from West Music here who can help if I'm not able to see everything, to be able to answer questions as they come up. So we don't want this to feel like I'm going to have my slides, I'm going to show you things, and that it has to be that way and that you have to hold all your questions till the end. No, feel free to jump in. And honestly, part of that connects to the way that I work in general in education spaces. As I mentioned, when some folks were coming in, I'm a board certified music therapist. And so that's my my training initially. I was trained in a really like behavioral sort of way. Really intrigued by behaviors, always really been interested in kids who had behavioral needs. But the more time I spent in those spaces, and at that time I was working primarily in special education spaces, the more I was like, something's not clicking here. Like, I feel like we're only addressing like surface level type of stuff, and there's deeper gunk underneath there that we're not really getting to. And so I spent some time getting an extra degree, like you do. And in the process of getting that, my PhD in expressive therapies from Leslie, I was drawn into the world adjacent to social emotional learning. At that time, I was looking at social identity theory and adolescence, particularly Black adolescents. I was living in New Orleans at the time and was really just intrigued by all of the cultural things I was seeing, by all the ways that particularly cultural behaviors were being labeled as problematic, and seeing all of these Black and brown kids get consistently punished or reprimanded for the way that they naturally engaged with music, and thought that was a problem. So I started exploring, what kind of music are we bringing into these kids? Is it culturally relevant to them? Is it presented in a way that's meaningful for them? Are they empowered in any way to engage in it? And as I worked through those topics that became so central to my PhD, after I published my dissertation, somebody went, oh, that's social emotional learning. And I was like, how did I do a whole PhD and never tap into that category? Because I was spending all my time looking at identity building and meaning making and all that sort of stuff. But after my PhD is when I got tapped into that world of social emotional learning. And so I'm excited to be able to bring in some of what I've learned, give you all a little taste of what the course is, what the asynchronous course on West Music is, and then, like I said, open the floor for questions. Before I do pull up my slides, one last thing I want to do, because I am, a hippy dippy therapist, and this just also is foundational to the work that I do, is to do a land acknowledgement, to acknowledge that at this precise moment in time, I am seated on Lakota, Nakota, and Anishinaabe land, also known as North Dakota. I am visiting family here currently. Usually I am on Miami land in Indianapolis, but I want to acknowledge that because those original stewards of the land, those original custodians of the land, had concepts about relationship with not just the land, but with each other. And the deeper I dive into social emotional learning, the more I realize that our Indigenous elders, not just the Indigenous elders who were the keepers of the land where I live now, but the Indigenous elders in my family, my ancestors that I learn about as I do more digging into my family history, they got a lot to teach us. And so I want to encourage you that as much as you are going to get information that's like from textbooks and junk, that there may also be a lot of really valuable social emotional information in your own lineage, if you can search for it. right, and find it. So I want to acknowledge that, the land that we live on. I also want to acknowledge the Kalinago people that my ancestors are descended from in the Caribbean, and the African ancestors that I don't know where they came from, right? And the disruption that occurred during the transatlantic slave trade there. So all of that is part of this, right? Acknowledging where we come from, acknowledging the knowledges that were passed down to us is all connected to how we engage in the world as social emotional beings. So thank you again, all of you, for being here. I saw a couple more folks just popped in, said, hey, hello from Texas and Arizona. Glad to see folks here. All right, so let me go grab my slides. Hey, look at that. It's still full screen. All right. So can folks see my little screen here? Yeah. Cool, cool. So I gave you a little bit of background on who I am, and we've heard a little bit on where y'all are coming from, where we practice. I would love to hear in the chat, if you're up for it, why you're here now. What's bringing you into this room, wanting to learn more about leveraging music for social emotional learning? And another way to frame that question is sort of the last question on this slide. What are the stakes we're seeing? Like, what's needed in our classrooms that's making us go, I want to learn a little more about this. Ooh, yeah. I see Liz saying, given another welcome, glad to be part of bringing these brilliant people to music educators. Oh, many students, thank you, Eileen, many students struggling after COVID. Yeah, struggling to come back into a school environment and be around people after a period of quarantine, or of being told that you had to stay away or keep your distance. How do you relate to people? I have a 4-year-old, and I know that it was an adjustment for her when she started going to preschool, because she spent several developmental years in isolation. Yeah. As our classrooms are becoming more diverse, I need to include more family stories. Yeah. Yeah. Wanting to make sure that you're encouraging more that's culturally relevant to the kids in your room. Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Topic is part of my dissertation. That's right. Yeah, Yashima, you shared with group drumming and social emotional learning. Very cool. I want to help provide a group drumming intervention / curriculum that embeds SEL competencies. Cool. Social skills are lacking in the lower grades classrooms. Yeah. To finally put the horse in front of the cart, right? Like I said, in these behavioral environments, so often I felt like we're just tripping over ourselves, like we're triaging, right? Constantly triaging and not really getting to the core of the problem. From Beth, I teach in a Title I school where many of my students are dealing with trauma. I want to be informed when I teach. Yeah, I think there are a lot of elements of SEL that are naturally trauma-informed. Obviously, there's a lot to trauma-informed teaching, trauma-informed learning, trauma-informed therapy, all of the trauma-informed things, but there are elements of SEL that are sort of natural fits to it for sure. From Jody, SEL is a big focus in my district right now, and I'd like to be able to relate that to my discipline. Awesome. From Emily, I teach both general music and SEL at my school. Very cool. I'm not new to teaching music, but this is my first year teaching SEL. I'm helping kids realize they can return to hanging out with friends at home and school. Yeah, and how to do that safely, right? From Emily, as a teacher who works with children, with hundreds of children each day / week, I'm always seeking additional ways to get to know and serve my kiddos. That's legit. From Brandon, desiring strategies for deeper connections and relationships with inclusivity as the tip-top priority. Absolutely. Yeah. Mary, I've been teaching for 20 years and I'm seeing so many more students with trauma and lack of social skills. Yeah, so seeing some recaps of things that we've heard, right? We want to be able to address the trauma that we're seeing, some of the deficits or needs, right? The higher needs that we're seeing kids coming into the classroom with socially. I see Emily, I just wanted more information to help my presentation, to help them. Yeah, and for Linda, how to do better discipline in the classroom, right? Or just changing how we think about discipline in general, right? I know a lot of my learning in SEL came from this place of just really sitting with, what is my role, really? You know, when I'm in the room, what am I really there to do? And some of that may or may not feel relevant to folks who are primarily educators. For me, like I mentioned, coming from a music therapy background, I'm often in there for the purpose of addressing non-musical goals, using music as a tool, right? So that sort of a natural way that I approach things, is that idea of I'm looking at how to help something, and music is the tool I'm going to use to do it. But I know when I was working more in an educator environment, I used to work at the School for the Blind in North Dakota as a Braille music educator, that wasn't always the goal. I'm trying to work on music and competence relating to music, and this other stuff is kind of peripheral. So thinking about what your role is in the room, and how what you're trying to pull out of the youth you're working with is related to that role, can help with the discipline piece for sure. But yeah, I see, we got other music therapists in the room too. Cool, from Michaelia. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Music therapist is doing work within the school system and looking for resources to further support the students with the very little time I have with them. Yes, I'm gonna share one right now before I forget it, because I didn't put it on my slides and it's at the top of my brain. Liberated SEL. I know they're on Twitter, but I think they have a website as well. But I really dig what they do, because they come at social emotional learning from a justice standpoint and are very, very clear about, they provide specific prompts, things for like writing prompts or things for your kids to be thinking about. They provide examples when they have permission, of course, examples of student work that they've come up with in relation to social emotional learning topics. Highly recommend their stuff. I really like them. Another one that I don't think I've mentioned before is Decenter the Teacher. They're on Instagram. And I like them a lot too, because they also present a lot of transformative justice oriented type of stuff, but that relates to how do you prepare yourself for the work of being a social emotional educator, asking prompts for you to consider and things for you to think about and unpack in your own background, so that you can come into the classroom more grounded in your values and how those relate to the social emotional skills you're trying to teach your youth. So that's a resource I want to make sure I share right off the top while it's in my brain. From Samara, how to weave SEL into drumming and classroom music classes. From Alyssa, trying to be as inclusive as I can, since I have been in multiple schools a year with an extremely diverse populations and their own individual needs. All that juggling, right? All that stuff that like mainstream folks out in the world don't realize music educators are having to do. If you're in a little tiny district and you're the music educator for everybody. I remember some of those North Dakota schools where it was like, yep, the band teacher is at this school today, and on Tuesday he's going to be over at this other one on the other side of town, managing multiple spaces. From Molly, I'm a music therapy intern. Hey, just interested in learning more about working with students. Very cool. Seeing folks talking about JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Teaching in special education, right? Yeah, music for self-regulation. All of these things, absolutely. I'm going to scroll because I know that I want to make sure I'm on top of time. Thank you, Liz, for correcting the liberated SEL handle. I thought there might have been an underscore in there, but thank you all so much for all of these insights and, giving me information about where you're coming from. And I hope that in my reading back some of these and giving little bits of like feedback in between them, that you're getting a sense of some commonalities, right, of things that people are seeing and reasons that are bringing us into the work. And I hope that just that alone is affirming for those of you in the room, because something that I also realize a lot of music educators struggle with is feeling really isolated where you are, and like nobody else is thinking about the stuff you're thinking about. And just know you're in a room with 40 plus other people who are thinking about the same stuff you're thinking about, right, ever. Sing and play instruments through these difficult times. Yeah, so that's exciting that you're in this space doing that work, and that there are other people here wanting to do that work too. So for context, since I've mentioned that I'm a music therapist, I want to make sure that I am clear about what that means and how that informs the work that I do, keeping in mind that this course is not designed to make you a music therapist, and that no one profession owns music, right, or any way of engaging with music, but that it's I like to give that positionality just so folks know where I'm coming from. So my preferred definition of music therapy is to talk about it as a dynamic and holistic relationship, and that spelling of holistic is intentional, from Indigenous scholar Renee Linklater, who wants us to think about holistic in that whole sense, right? We're looking at the whole child, and sometimes that can get lost in a lot of holistic spaces. Things sort of tend to dip into pseudoscience and pseudo-religious sort of connotations. And so we're wanting to bring it back into this sense of wholeness, right, that we're looking for. So a dynamic and holistic relationship between a participant, the qualified professional, in this case, an MTBC in the dominant US culture, and the act of musicking. And credit for the term musicking, some of you may be familiar with Christopher Small, who coined that term. And so when I speak about musicking, I'm relating to his definition and contextualizing of that term. So that includes not just playing, writing, or otherwise creating music, but listening to it, discussing it in embodied ways, talking about how it feels in our bodies to listen to it, moving, crafting other art alongside music engagement. That's what I'm thinking when I say musicking. And in that, we tie back into those land acknowledgements and ancestral acknowledgements that I made, acknowledging that the merging of arts is a reintegration of Indigenous people's framing. I remember a great conversation I had actually as part of the podcast that I co-host in collaboration with the Black Music Therapy Network. That podcast is called Black Creative Healing, and it's had 3 seasons, and we're in sort of this like amorphous seasonless phase right now because we've started hosting retreats and wellness events, and that makes it hard to do the podcast regularly, but we're looking at trying to get back into a seasonal framework again. But one of our episodes, we had a great conversation with a South African music therapist named Nsamu Munga, and Nsamu shared how in his culture's definition of music, that it wasn't just sound, that the literal definition of music included masks and costuming and ritual and dance, and that there was no universe in which those things were divorced from each other. And so he said he always found it so strange how dance and movement were separated from music. He said, no, that's music too. So thinking about all of these things, as I mentioned before, with the land acknowledgement as not just being new ideas, that they are things that are almost like a reintegration of Indigenous ideas. And thank you, Liz, for sharing that you are on top of things. I heard you were, but I didn't, I had to see it to believe it. Just getting those links right in the chat. That's great. So yeah, that those reintegrations are important. So like I said, course is not designed to turn you into a music therapist. Becoming an MTBC requires a sort of lengthy initiation into psychology and sociology that are outside the scope of this course. And this is also not a course that's designed to show you one right way to do things. I'm all about providing opportunities and multiple points of access. And then you take what has meaning for you and you can let the rest go. So we hope to offer you lots of new perspectives and possibilities for enlivening your practice as a music educator in this course. So the framework for social emotional learning, and this is actually a slide that I go in depth in unit 2 of the course. This is the framework I work with for social emotional learning from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL. So in their definition, SEL is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. And that definition is so dense, I color-coded it because I was like, let me just like sit for a second with these words. And I see comments coming into the chat too. Oh yes, yeah, that slides are coming together. Yeah. So the blue text, I highlighted all of these verbs, the things that we want kids to be able to do, right? We want them to acquire and apply, develop, manage, achieve, feel and show, establish and maintain, and make responsible and caring decisions, right? And then you've got all these nouns in the pink: healthy identities, emotions, personal and collective goals, empathy for others, supportive relationships, responsible and caring decisions. So all of these things fit into these sort of 3 categories of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, right? We want them to be developing self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, social awareness, and relationship skills. So I sometimes think of responsible decision-making as like something that bridges between the self elements and the social elements, that there are responsible decisions that we can make to take care of ourselves. There are responsible decisions we can make to take care of each other and the quality of our relationships with each other. These are all elements of social emotional learning, and they're situated in this ecological sort of framework. So many of you might be familiar with Bronfenbrenner's socio-ecological model from the 70s. Yeah. So with the individual in the center, or in this case, the student, and then their classroom environment, schools, families and caregivers, and communities. So there are lots of different ways to conceptualize the socio-ecological model, but they're all concentric circles. Every version of it that you'll see, it's sort of nested from the individual out to the collective, right? And some other ways that we can think about this, I should actually add this slide at some point. There's a graphic that I started playing around with that I call Bronfenbrenner meets Yasso. Yasso is a researcher who in, I think it was 2015, started looking at relational capital, or types of capital that kids are bringing into their classrooms, and that they're being equipped with, and that their schools are equipping them with, ways for them to navigate within the world, that their family equips them with capital. And I think when you sort of like combine these two ideas, that what you get is an even deeper look at this, because everything that a kid thinks about themselves and about how they relate socially is informed by every one of those other circles, right? Every one of those other environments that they spend time in. And so their relational capital, their ability to relate to people, is influenced at every single level. And so the more that you can be aware of that as you're attempting to try and also influence their sense of self and social awareness, that will benefit you as well. So that's the framework I'm coming from in terms of social emotional learning and music therapy. I want to take like a brief pause before we dive into like the last few minutes here of what this could possibly look like, and share some ideas. But any questions or thoughts that are sitting with folks so far? We're feeling good, just taking it all in. Cool, I see some nods, great. Yeah, so this is an image that I think also is shared in Unit 2, or it might be in Unit 3. So what I've got on the left side is a classroom setup where we've got some music technology. This was a setup for a one-on-one. When we're set up for a group, it usually looks a little bit different. We try to set it up so that people can access all of the technological instruments all around the table. But there's always a computer. We use Ableton, that's our digital audio workstation of choice. There are free ones. Ableton is not free, it is not cheap. We've thought about that. We've used Soundtrap and other things before, but we're lucky enough that our department is situated in a school of engineering and technology, which I don't know any other music therapy program that's situated in a school like that, but it means they pay us well and we get to buy fancy equipment like this. So we get to show kids industry standard music equipment, and then we find ways to get it for them cheaply if we can. So one of our workarounds so far has been to recommend for kids and give them iTunes gift cards so that they can get apps that give you a copy of Ableton Lite for free. So Koala is one. If you're interested in learning Ableton and don't want to have to pay $100 for the intro version of it, Koala costs $5. And it's a cute little field recording app, and it also comes with a serial code for Ableton Live Lite. So that's one of the workarounds that we try to do to help kids be able to get access to this software cheaply. So there's an Ableton Push, that's a drum machine. We've got some headphones and an audio interface. And so we set things up in a approach and play style environment. That's what we call it. So the instrument is there for you to approach, and we invite you to play. And we do that with very minimal involvement from the adults. The kids lead as much as possible. Even with little kids, they love something with a lot of lights and buttons that they are being encouraged to push. And so we really love to use music technology as much as possible, and encourage the kids to just tinker. And while they're doing it, we give them little bits of feedback on what we're hearing, like, ooh, that's cool. Oh, that sounded interesting. Did you notice this thing happened when you push that button? And we start to try and stoke their curiosity. And in doing that, we're inviting them to pay attention to what's going on with the instrument and how they're influencing it, right? How they're influencing the sound. And gradually, as they get to know us more and get more comfortable with the things that we're doing, we can start to draw their attention to other aspects of their engagement in the room. So we craft agreements together. That's another image that's on this slide here. So we've got welcome to music therapy with Dr. T, our agreements, we will communicate with each other. When we have disagreements, we can work towards compromise. When we can't compromise, because that was something a kid was like, what if I can't compromise? Okay, if we can't compromise, we agree to short breaks to figure things out. And then I also encourage them to reframe the word can't. And so you see in tiny parentheses, struggle to. If we struggle to compromise, we agree to start to try and figure things out. And so sometimes I'll write on there, like, here's what we did today, if they're working on a particular song. So you can see on this slide or on that whiteboard, I'd written next time, add bass. So they'd been working on a track and they wanted to amp up the bass a little bit. So we have all this stuff set up in this approach and play format, and the idea is to get them to tinker. We give them feedback. Eventually we start giving them feedback about things like, hey, when this person did this thing, did you notice how you invited them to sit closer to you? What do you think about that? Do you like how close they're sitting to you? Do you like what you're working on together? Why don't you tell them what you like about what they did? You know, you can start to encourage little aspects of their engagement just as feedback, you know, and what we notice, or what we have noticed so far when we've started to do that, because this is part of a research project that I'm still in the middle of right now. What we've noticed when we started to do that is that eventually kids start not just taking the feedback that we're giving them and making different choices based on the feedback we're giving, but they start asking us for our feedback. They start looking to us like with intention before we even have thought to give them feedback, to say, hey, did you hear that? Did you see what I did? Did you like this? Is this, you know, and that's exciting because that shows us that there's trust being grown and that there's an interest in deepening our relationship together. And we encourage that when they do that for each other as well. You know, at the end of December, I'm going to stop my screen share for a hot second because I know we're coming up on the end of our time together. At the end of December, one of our groups, it was the first time that they had ever had the opportunity for each of them individually. It was a group of 5th grade boys, each of them individually working on their own song. First time they were going to show them to each other. And I was like, this could go, like I was prepping the music therapy practica students because I was like, I know y'all have worked hard on helping these boys with their stuff. This could go really badly. Like, you just need to be prepared that kids might laugh at each other. Kids are gonna, you know, kids might get upset about the reactions of their peers. Like, you just need to be prepared. I know Linda knows. Middle schoolers can be mean. They can be so mean. But it was such, I mean, there were definitely some moments where we did have like a couple of like, come here, let's not talk like that about our friends, you know, but they can also be wonderful, said Liz. Yeah, at the end of the session, my favorite thing happened, I love when this happens, is when a kid asks to hear somebody's piece again. And they said, I want to hear that beat drop. And I loved watching the synchronicity of all these 5th grade boys going like this. And then they all waited for it. And then there was a hey, and hands are in the air. And I'm going, this is it. This is what we want, right? This is what we're looking for. They were amping each other up. And this was a group of kids who frequently did not want to work together. And that's why we tried the whole individual projects thing, didn't want to work with us. We're frustrated frequently by the equipment. We're constantly, you know, in each other's faces, in our faces, lots of behaviors. But we just kept at it, kept trying to build the group, build the camaraderie, and encourage them to sort of dig deep into themselves. And they ended up creating something that they all could be proud of. And we can't wait to show that off to their parents at the end of the year. Like, now they're going to come back and try and work on a collaborative piece to go in the album with all of their individual tracks. Cross your fingers when we start working with them again in February. But yeah, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for ultimately an environment where more youth feel empowered to share their unique selves, their authentic voices, where more staff, teachers in the room, social workers, everybody involved in that student's lives feels more connected to them, where the relationships feel more deep, rich, authentic, meaningful, and ultimately an environment where everybody thrives, right? Where everyone feels like they can speak their voices and speak their needs as authentically as possible and get those needs met. That's the world we're looking to create when we focus on social emotional learning and use music as a tool to do that. So 7:31. Look at that. I know we are sitting at time, but I want to encourage any other like questions or thoughts that folks have in the last like moments here, just to sort of tie ourselves, tie the ends off of our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so warm, Natasha, and just you make it so exciting to hear about these different ways that we can think about SEL with our students. I will say, anybody who has to drop off, we will send you the video in the chat tomorrow, so watch your email. And if you would all like to stay on to ask some questions one-on-one, what a fantastic opportunity. We're happy to stay on for those of you who would like to remain.
Cool. Yeah. Groove Pizza. Ooh, I'll have to look into that. I haven't heard of Groove Pizza either. Yeah. Yes, yeah. Emily, you're having a similar moment to me when I finished my PhD and was like, wait a minute. And yes, if you want more, definitely dig into the course on Music Constructed. It was a labor of love. I was happy to put it together, and I'm excited to see, you know, more people engage with it and
It's amazing.
explore it.
I read the transcripts, I watched the videos. It's a really easy thing to work through. The videos are 20-30 minutes at a time, and there's some exercises for you to work through on your own time, your own space. But I think that if you are looking for a couple of hours of professional development, this is a great place to go, because you've had the opportunity to meet Natasha here tonight.
Yeah. Yay, thanks for the thumbs up.
Well, if you do have any questions, you're welcome to email us at service@musicconstructed.com. And you can find Natasha's bio, and her contact, her email is linked to her biography on our website. And so you can just reach out to her directly. We're so grateful that you joined us tonight. We know that your time is valuable, and we're so pleased to be able to provide these sorts of opportunities to you as music educators. We hope you have a great night, and we look forward to seeing you again for another PD at Music Constructed.